Good evening to everyone. My name is Andres Rodriguez Pose. I'm the director of the Cañada Blanc Center here at the LSE. I am the Professor of Studies Chair and a Professor of Economic Geography, and I'm your host for tonight. Tonight, we have the big pleasure of introducing a topic that not very often features at a place like the LSE, which is rooted in place and how architecture shapes lives. And I'm very, very happy to talk about that in a place like this building. This building, the Marshall Building, is our newest building at the LSE, one that was opened barely 2 years ago, a bit more than 2 years ago, and a building that has become so popular. It's nice, you can see the teaching rooms, the environment, that it's impossible to get any sort of possibility of teaching here. I've been trying for the last 3 years, and I always get rejected. Why? Simply because students feel that the teaching environment and the teaching experience is fundamentally enhanced by being here. So, design good buildings, and I've learned that the architects that designed this building won the Pritzker Prize, so the Nobel Prize for Architecture, changes lives, and not just when you're studying at the LSE, but whether you're designing a remote or a school in a remote village, or the most signature building that you'll find in any of our mega cities in the world. And to talk about that, we have a significant lineup of some of the best minds on this topic, but I'm not going to introduce them now. What I'm going to say is I'm very grateful that this is a joint event together with the Cañada Blanc Center, but also the Cervantes Institute here in London, the Instituto Eduardo Torroja, and with a very nice sponsorship of the Mexican Embassy. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave you with Victor Ugarte, who's the co-organizer and the director of the Cervantes Institute here in London. Very good.
Thank you, Andres. Her Excellency Josefa González Blanco Ortiz Mena, Ambassador of Mexico to the United Kingdom. Andres Rodriguez Pose, Princesa de Asturias Chair, Director of LSE Cañada Blanc Center, and Professor of Economic Geography. Thank you very much. Colleagues and friends, bienvenidos, buenas noches, good evening. Special thanks to our speakers, Ricky Burdett, Gloria Pérez, Fernando Sordo, Magdalena Flipek. Architecture is closely linked to the birth of humanity and civilization. Architecture shapes humans and the landscape surrounding them, and its enormous power can be aggressive and harmful to our planet, or sustainable and kind to its environment. We are committed to sustainability, and today we will see that sustainable construction and architecture are not new, but as old as humanity itself. The Cervantes Institute is proud of its collaboration with the Cañada Blanc Center at LSE, Sordo Magdaleno, ARUP, and the Eduardo Torroja Institute of Construction Sciences. The embassies of Mexico and Spain and the Spanish Chamber of Commerce have supported this event. For those unfamiliar with Instituto Cervantes, it's an official language body created by the Spanish government. It is responsible for teaching Spanish language and the co-official languages in Spain and the cultures of Spanish-speaking countries. It's present in 90 cities on the 5 continents. If you like more information about our coming Spanish courses, we are offering courses on Catalan, Basque, Galician languages, and one new one about Mayan languages and cultures. You can find them on our website. We especially recommend the Spain and Latin American program at the Oxford Literary Festival, which will feature one of our most celebrated chefs, Ferran Adrià, on its opening day on March 29, and writers from Latin America and Spain. I will now leave the floor to Her Excellency, the Ambassador of Mexico. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. I need to brush up my Mayan. as Mayan origins that I have, I need to take that course. I'm certainly going to enroll. It's deeply needed. Querido amigo Víctor Ugarte, dear organizers, dear friends and panelists, buenas tardes a todas, a todos y a todes. It is an immense pleasure to welcome you today to the Rooted in Place, exploring how design shapes communities. This conversation, organized by the Cañada Blanche Center at LSE, Instituto Cervantes, Instituto Torroja, Sordo Madaleno, and ARUP, is an extraordinary opportunity to come together and examine how the design choices we make is not only the physical spaces around the world, but the very fabric of the community that they serve. As a Mexican ambassador, it is an honor to be able to highlight and celebrate the Hispanic perspective on our shaped quest of architectural excellence. It is a celebration of global exchange of ideas, where diverse perspectives, traditions, and innovation cover and create spaces that transcends boundaries and cultures. The diversity of voices in the conversation with participants such as Miguel Dols from Dols Wong Architects, Fernando Sordo Madaleno, Gloria Pérez Álvarez Quiñones from the Instituto Roja, and Magdalena Filippo de Arup, present here today and create a dynamic and inspiring environment of exploring how design chooses and shapes community. Together, we will help understand how we can continue to build spaces to foster inclusion, sustainability, and resilience in a rapidly changing world. Likewise, the groundbreaking work of Fernando Sordo Madaleno and Sordo Madaleno Architects, with their exceptional contributions to the field of architecture, both in Mexico and internationally. These are the testament of an incredibly talented and vision emerging in Mexico. The recognition of Sordo Madaleno Arquitectos on the global stage is a source of immense pride for Mexico, as it showcases the power of architecture heritage that not only shapes our cities, but influences the world. Arquitectura from Hispanic perspective holds a unique and a profound connections to the land, culture, and community. In many Latin American Spanish-speaking countries, regions, sustainability is not just a trend, it's rooted in centuries of traditions where indigenous knowledge and local materials have been used to create buildings that are harmonious with nature. Today, as we face the challenges of climate change and urbanization, this deep respect for the environment can offer valuable insight into how architecture can both honor our past and provide sustainable solutions for the future. The emphasis on sustainable design in the work of our distinguished panelists reflects commitment to create spaces that not only meet the needs of the present, but will certainly ensure the health and well-being of the future generations. As we engage in today's discussion, let us remember that architecture is not just about creating buildings. It's about creating spaces where people can thrive, where culture and identities can be celebrated, and where communities can truly grow. It is a deep pride and excitement that I welcome each and every one of you in this very important conversation. And I do look forward to the inspiring ideas and insights that will emerge from this time together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador. And now it's the time to call the panelists to come and sit over here before the presentation. So first, Fernando Sordo Magdaleno, please. Come and take your seat. Fernando Sordo Magdaleno is the Director of Architecture and partner at Sordo Magdaleno. Then we have Madalena Filipek, who is a project architect at Arab. Arab, so yes. Third is Gloria Perez Alvarez Quiñones, who is the head of Physical Chemical Test Unit at the Instituto Torroja of the Spanish National Research Council. And finally, we have our very own Professor Rico Baudet, who is a professor of urban studies at the LSE and the director of the very successful and influential LSE Cities. Without further ado, I'm going to ask Fernando Sordo Magdaleno to take the podium and start with his presentation, and of course the 4 presentations will be followed by questions from the audience, so start sharpening your knives, thinking about important questions, and then I'll wait for your incisive questions towards the end.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be surrounded by such great minds, and thank you so much, Ambassador, for being here. It's really a privilege. I will try to keep it, short because we have 10 minutes, and I think the discussion with all of these great minds, I think it's super. I'm really looking forward to. But I really wanted to talk about 3 ideas, 3 thoughts. That represent 3 projects of our firm. The 3 projects are in Mexico, but in different places, in different states. My first thought would be, how can institutional architecture act as a catalyst for a community? The second thought would be, how can private architecture negotiate a public role? And the third one is, how can a mixed-use project integrate into the urban fabric and act as a catalyst for public space? And on the first thought, I wanted to present one project that is quite dear to us, and it has been open almost now for 2 years. And the story behind the project was a client that came to us and he was the owner of a club in Mexico, and really wanted to do something that would represent the history of that football club. And he started with the idea of 2 big components. So the part of operations, football, and we start to digest the program that was asked for us. The project was sitting in between 6 football pitches. So it was quite, strict. Where should all the program go? But I believe it was really interesting. And when we thought about the title for this conversation, doesn't matter the typology, the size of the project, or the use really, you can shape a community, an institution, or a city, with doing these smart decisions through design. And when we start to look at the program, it was quite interesting because we had housing, we had a church, we have the clubhouses, operations. So all of these different programs, that it was almost like a miniature city within the project. So the whole point was, okay, how can we really nurture community in that institution? How can really the younger players that live there, that actually there's a school, can interact with the players that are in the first and most important team in Mexico, So we started to develop an idea of this institution as a campus instead of an office building. And here you can see a little bit of the layout, where you can see all the independent program and how it starts to relate. And the public area, or all the public spaces, really is the thing that ties everything together. And This is a little bit of the images of the project. And this central plaza was one of the elements that we added to the initial program. And I believe now has become almost like that public square. These are some images on the building and the local use of materials, the labor, the local labor was introduced in this building, and that for us was really important and key for the delivery of this project. And these are some just images of that public space that really ties everything together. And in Mexico, I mean, we have a little bit of a better weather than the UK. So we can really have all of these open spaces. And those open spaces, they really become the life of the building, the heart of the building. And I wanted just to represent a little bit of the images on how that space has changed the dynamic of the club. Linking, all the parts from the operations to the football to the younger kids, and they interact in this public square. And another client came to us with the idea of doing it at a school. And this is a fantastic building. I was really impressed when I came in. And I truly believe on the power of this typology. And this is a school that is in Cholula, Puebla, so in the outskirts of Mexico City. We have almost 40 volcanoes. And this is a picture by Jose Maria Velasco that actually I wanted to give a shout out to, because there's going to be an exhibition at the National Gallery next week. So actually, this is a view of that town in Puebla, but now is a little bit different. And the school was really nestled in between all of these housing, but there wasn't a proper public space for all of that housing. So instead of just thinking about the building and thinking about the school, we really started to think about all of the different typologies that we had. And we came across this area that it wasn't walkable. You didn't have any parks or recreational spaces. So we truly believe that the school can become that community, almost that community center, because the kids go to school from 9 to 3, but what happens afterwards or what happens in the weekend? So actually this infrastructure can not only serve one purpose, and I believe that's sustainability, when one building really performs other things. And actually you start to see the construction site, and it was, in between all of these housing, but there was a clear barrier in between. So there was a different, it changed quite dramatically in terms of level from the street towards the plot. And the idea was, how can we use that into our advantage and really create something that would engage the students with the actual building? And instead of being this, having this building and having the central courtyard, why don't we use the building as a platform for interaction? The building itself becomes a playground, and why not on the weekends it becomes the public park for all of that suburban area? And these are some images of the project that is during its ongoing construction. And I really like, these images, because you start to understand, a little bit of how architecture can teach, not only in the classrooms, but outside. And this is a really interesting image on how the building really is the form or how it looks. It's not really the objective, it's what it creates to the community. And this is a little bit of how the building is going to look in a couple of years, or hopefully 1 year. But really doing a private building and putting it with this conscious about the public and creating that sense of community was really well received by the client. And now I'm going to talk a little bit different. Now I'm going to another type scale. This is a project in Mexico City that it's a mixed use project, and it's quite different in terms of scale. So if we want to talk about the project, probably we need to talk about the broader of what's happening in Mexico City. So you can see in the graph on the right-hand side where the downtown was founded, on top of a lake, but it has expanded rapidly to the outskirts. And I mean, that's typical. But actually, the center of the city has been abandoned in some ways. People are moving to the suburbs, where really the services, the servicing, transport, everything is located in the downtown area. And something that is quite unique, and if you see this map, it's a little bit of the socioeconomic situation of families around Mexico City. But as you can see, it's almost a tapestry of different classes in different areas, but it's not consistent with probably, if you see this map of London, it would be dramatically different because it would expand from probably the central London to the outskirts. But here in Mexico, it's actually not that way. And in many ways, that's an advantage. And I'm going to explain why. But as you can see, this is Mexico City right now. And I mean, there are 22 million people living here. And there are not a lot of public spaces, I would say, in some areas. And this is Paseo de la Reforma, so this is the most relevant avenue in Mexico. And the tendency has been to create these really high, tall buildings that, for the avenue is quite interesting. But what starts to happen on the back of those tall buildings is quite dramatic, because most of the buildings on the back are parking spaces. So that has been, displacing housing and creating some concerns. So when we started to look into the project, and that was 12 years ago, so 2013, hopefully, I mean, this is an ongoing construction, but the project is situated quite closely to the downtown, to the Central Plaza. And this is a little bit of the socioeconomic distribution map within that area. So when the client came forward, and it's a bank, he was looking to have a more central position because the employees were from different groups. So we really started to work with the bank together to really find the right spot. And this is a little bit of a map highlighting the public realm. So the Zócalo, that's the Central Plaza, that's the middle of Mexico City, and the project is highlighted in red. And in a couple of years, 10, well, not a couple, now 10, they have been engaging in just acquiring different plots of land that were underused. And, just to exemplify, so if this is the map of the project, and I'm now going to show the floor plan of the actual building that is in the rotonda, no? And what we worked together with the bank was, okay, how can we create a development that really solves the issue with the parking spaces instead of creating this really high rise? Because the first option was to do a 300-meter tall building. But working with them, we really wanted to create something more horizontal that created a better human scale. And actually, there was this really nice building in the middle of the project, but it's not a listed building. But we convinced the client to maintain that, and actually that became the whole purpose of the project. So this that we call La Vecindad. Now it's the most interesting object and building in terms of commercial performance. So working really with the context, with the local architecture, creating this would be the Central Plaza for the project. We really wanted to create a human scale for these buildings. So, and this is a little bit of the images in the street level. And then working with the bank, creating these open gardens. And actually, when you have a mixed-use development and you work together with it, you can use, the rooftops of the commercial spaces to engage on public amenities for the offices or even housing. And this is a little bit what it's creating. And I mean, now you know which bank is it, right? I was trying not to say, but I mean, it's this is the main drop off, and that's the idea, how we can maintain that 7-level basement or base of a building, and then have on top of that a horizontal office building, and this is a little bit of that project in the main avenue. And I mean, that was I hope I didn't push my time, but I really wanted to talk about how 3 radically different projects with different typologies can impact communities in different ways. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Magdalena, please.
It is very nice to see so many of you, and such an honor to be in the presence of all of you, such great minds and amazing presentations. So congratulations.
Thank you.
So I also would like to take you on the journey with me today to rediscover the material that has been with our ancestors from the inception of our civilization, really. A material that has shaped our history, our architecture, and has been a cornerstone to design. It is a material that is a symbol of strength, natural beauty, as well as thermal resilience. I'm talking here about stone. I will show you 2 projects with 2 very different contexts, and both of them, they are made of one material, a stone, a material that has been overlooked for a very, very long time. Right now, we're just looking at the modern buildings, and you can find it on the tiles, also in decoration elements. But for the generations, our ancestors have really put a lot of faith into it. Both of those projects, they have a very visionary effect on communities and the way how they shape them. These 2 projects will be the drag white lotus school in Himalaya. It's on the side of the Indian border. And another project is Sagrada Familia. So the first project is a low-tech project with very constrained budget. It also lies in the very remote region of Himalayan mountain. It is cut off by the snow for 6 months. And it is also located in the developing country with little resources and infrastructure. It is a visionary example that is shaping community in surroundings. The other project is Sagrada Familia. It is obviously a very high-tech project involving 3D printing, CNCs, and all the fancy technology you can think of. And also this project has a flexible budget and has a lot of, it's unconstrained in terms of the climate. It has a very nice Mediterranean climate and is located in the affluent part of the world. It is very visionary for the generations to come. And here we've got the lovely overview on the master plan of the drag white lotus school that you can see in front of you. And about the school, I just wanted to show you an example of where does that lie. And just by looking at these 2 images, I'm thinking, well, this is really on the fringe of the hill. So something like Frank Lloyd Wright, another really great architect, was always placing his buildings on the fringe of the hill, overlooking the rest of the surroundings. So it gives you like a podium. So this is a very nice feature that we have tried to incorporate it here. And as it lies on the fringe of the mountains and is cut out by the snow for 6 months, the other 6 months in the year, it is basically very difficult for us to bring additional materials to the site because there is no infrastructure, there is no road, there is no water infrastructure in place. So that was a natural choice for us to reincorporate the materials we find on the site or nearby the site, and that also reduces the carbon footprint. And this is something that we did. This also greatly incorporates the local culture and heritage. And I just wanted to show you a reminder, who are we designing for? This is a future of Ladakh, its children. It's extremely poor area of India, and those children, they would otherwise have to migrate to other megacities, where they would not be seeing their parents for very long time. Some of them, they wouldn't be even able to come back to see them again. So I just wanted to say that this project is really so special and remarkable in terms of the sustainability, because it reclaims those materials from the local context, which is like granite blocks you are seeing on the upper picture on the right, on the left. That is sort of really blending it nicely. And again, that brings to my mind a quote of Frank Lloyd Wright and how he was saying, you know, you've done a good job as a designer if you are able to blend into the context totally and you do not see where the building finishes and where the context starts. And I think this picture speaks for itself. Another really great feature in those buildings, in this entire master plan, is this, that we used the local labor only. Many of the people, they were not able to be on the site before. They did not know what the construction is. So we are talking here about the people that were incorporating what they saw in the local context, which is the wood and the mat, okay? And they were trying to make it coherent. So you can see that on the inner face of the wall, we've got the mud bricks that are literally made by those people from, you know, they have no background in school. This is the first school we've made for them. And they basically dry them out on the sun and put them into the place. And it come very beautifully together. We also stuck, whenever we could, PV panels just to run electricity for those children, and made sure that we've got the water grid supply for them. And here are some of the features from sustainability. So we've got, on the first place, the trompe wall. The trompe wall principle is basically something that our ancestors have been using for inceptions of, you know, of many years, really. So trompe wall is basically a thick layers of adobe wall or just stones, and they will be climbing all the solar gain energy during the day, and then during the night they would be gradually releasing it, providing the thermal comfort. There is additional layer to this by applying the trompe wall. So the French inventor of this wall have decided and tested it out that by painting one face of the wall in black and providing the face of the glass just beneath that, you will provide an air gap. So with the black wall and the glass just behind that, the air inside will be circulating, heating it up, and that will act as a storage. In addition to this, we have been providing the higher up windows, which are sort of really good for natural ventilation and also for daylight. We also have a very difficult region with earthquakes. And here, it's not the school that matters, it's the lives. So when the evacuation happens, and last time it happened in 2017, then we need to act. And this is why we also have been redesigning it. So this is phase 2 of the master plan. This building has been in the 80s. So it's quite a long time. And it is inspired by the mandala, which is a Buddhist symbol of the faith. And the patron of the school is actually Dalai Lama. So what is really lovely about this school, the entire grid, entire shapes, we are making it in order to show it to the children that when they start, talking, straight away, they start drawing. They don't start writing first. They actually draw diagrams because as principle of Buddhism, you have to draw diagrams. And this is also how the spiritual leaders are incorporating spiritual shapes, which are geometries, into the context. And this is what the client asked us to do, and this is what we did. And this is a reminder, who are we designing for again? The second project is Sagrada Familia, and we've got some lovely shots from construction. This is the Maris Tower. The blocks are sort of being put in place. And what I really love about this project is that it's a vision of long-term construction, long-term vision of one person. It took one person to really take this tremendous building to go such a long way. It was a person that believed in that. And sometimes this is all what it takes. And what is really great about Gaudi is that he never shy away from using new materials. He actually used on one of the towers the earliest form of concrete. Nevertheless, he appreciated the beauty of the old materials and the history of his ancestors. And this is why he used stone. And stone is a material that is its thermal qualities, durability, and exceptional natural beauty is just overtaking and really is a greener alternative to steel and concrete and is also locally sourced. And here is a scope of Arup's work. So we are seeing here the Tower of Mary, Tower of Jesus with the spires, and a couple of others too. As part of this context of work, we have been working in Arup for the engineering, structural engineering and feasibility study of the glory facade, which is one of the most stunning facades, the most extraordinary and out of this world, because for Gaudi's time, this is really quite extraordinary. And the stones that have been placed on the side are something that has been pre-tested before, and it has been sort of pre-compressed using stainless steel tendons. And apart from that, each of those stones, if they didn't meet the criteria, they unfortunately had to be out. The CNC machine was also going around the edges, so that's why we got such a lovely finish. And the third picture shows how the panels are lifted into the place. Another really great feature that Gaudi incorporated in his vision, he was reclaiming the stones from the local context, but to carry on this vision, we also have been reclaiming stones from deconstructed in Barcelona buildings. Gaudi was also fantastic at maximizing daylight and natural ventilation. He did not lose any opportunity whatsoever. So you can see in here in the Maris Tower how those openings are really reclaiming this daylight and ventilation. And you can see exactly the same on the staircase or on the opening of the towers, as well as he quite rightfully has incorporated biomimicry, not only in Sagrada Familia, but also in La Pedrera, the other building in Barcelona that you can see has imitated the termite ventilation system. So this is in that picture over here. And really, I just wanted to conclude this presentation with saying I showed you two projects, two very different contexts, and they spoke one universal truth, which was basically architecture is not only about aesthetics, but it is as much about responsibility that we hold towards the environment. The material choice is not only about the technicalities, it is way more beyond this. It creates identity and resilience. This is something we want to see, and we have to think when we build, whatever we build, what do we want to leave behind? Because whatever we do now echoes in the future. And innovation isn't about just creating new materials. We love graphite, of course we do. It creates new properties. It really steps forward. But we already have a legacy as well. So we can look at it, we can rethink it, we can incorporate it, and make sure that our future is actually relying on something that we have been having from our ancestors as well. And I think this is what we did here today, reinvestigating the stone and rediscovering it. Thank you very much.
Now it's time for Gloria Pérez Álvarez Quiñones from the Instituto de Roja of the Spanish National Capital.
Thank you very much to the organizers for inviting me to be here. Very interesting, my colleagues, their talks, and I think I will say something similar than Madalena, but from a different point of view. So I hope we can get a good information together. Okay, I will talk today about innovation and tradition in the development of sustainable urban materials. My point of view is from the materials. the construction materials. We all know that cities give rise to an important, a major sustainability problem. Just as simple figures is that cities cover around 3% of the Earth's surface, but we produced in cities, we produce more than 70% of the greenhouse gases emissions. And this problem will be growing in the next picture because urban population is increasing worldwide. Another figure, very simple, is that by 2050, almost 85% of the Europeans will live in cities. So the problem is really important, and this translates in many problems in the field of environmental impact. We all know that these problems, these environmental problems in cities relate to air pollution, a high energy demand, which is associated with high CO2 emissions, a lot of tons of residues of waste accumulated in the cities or their surroundings, and also the increase in the temperature of the cities compared to the surrounding rural areas in the known as urban heat island effect. And all these problems give rise in turn to especially health problems for the citizens and also inequality and vulnerability, very related to social problems in the cities, related to all these ideas I'm bringing today. Well, the idea I want to share with you today is that the development of innovative materials with improved performance can help mitigating these problems and advance towards more sustainable and habitable buildings and urban areas. And this is one of the most important topics we deal with in the Institute of Construction Science, Eduardo Torroja, in which I work. It belongs to the Spanish Research Council, the CSIC, and there are several groups that focus their research in the development of more sustainable cement-based materials. You know, cement is not especially sustainable material, but we are working on strategies to make it more sustainable through different strategies. Some groups work in reducing the environmental impact of manufacturing the cement-based materials, reusing waste from other industrial processes. Others work in giving enhanced performance to the materials, like photocatalytic asphalt, for example, that can make pollutants, harmful substances through chemical processes convert into harmless products, so improving the environmental quality. And also increasing the durability of these materials by giving advanced functionalities as capability of self-healing with no external intervention, self-healing the microcracks appearing in the cementitious matrix. My research group, we focus our research in developing construction materials with advanced optical properties. What I mean is that we try to optimize the management of solar radiation in the urban envelope. We want to use materials with an adequate amount of solar energy reflected to the environment, the exterior environment, and also with the adequate amount of heat emitted to this environment, which is different in each location, in each climate conditions, and in each orientation, and so on. And for this, we have the capability of characterizing the thermo-optical properties of building and urban materials, which is to characterize these two types of properties: the solar reflectance, or albedo for architects, and thermal emittance. For this, we have portable equipment which allows us to characterize in-use materials. We do in-field campaigns to characterize the in-use materials in several cities in Spain and in Latin America. And also we can use them in the lab, of course, to characterize commercial or under development materials. And with this, we have built a catalog of thermo-optical properties of urban material, which is an information that was lacking in the knowledge of construction materials. And it's important for the design of buildings and the design of urban actuations, and to get more reliable results from the energy simulation tools that use the designers for defining the buildings and so on. And then with these tools, we work in the development of these materials with advanced optical properties. One example of this type of innovative materials we work on are passive daytime radiative cooling materials, or super cool materials are called, which have the characteristic of being able to be more than 5 degrees Celsius cooler than the environment, even when they are under the solar radiation. And this is because they have a high reflectance of the solar the solar radiation, and also a high capacity of emitting the heat in the form of thermal radiation, infrared radiation, so losing heat very efficiently. These materials were developed very recently. The first paper on these materials is from 2014. But there are already some commercial products, like this Japanese company, Space Cool. And our contribution to the development of these materials is within a European project in which we are working in harmonizing the characterization, the optical characterization of these materials, which is very demanding because of their very specific response. And also we have built a full-scale prototype in which we are working to assess the cooling potential of this technology in building applications. We have also developed smart thermochromic materials, and this, Magdalena, I must thank you because you described the thermal wall very, very detailed, and so it helps me because we developed this type of this is a mortar for facade coatings, and you see that the mortar is highly reflecting. You see it's white, it reflects the solar radiation when the temperature is high. So it avoids overheating of the facade. When the mortar is covering the facade of building, it avoids overheating. When the temperature decreases below a certain critical value, the material changes to another state in which it doesn't reflect the solar radiation, but absorbs it, and so favors solar heating. So it adapts to the environmental conditions, the temperature conditions. We have developed this material, and we have implemented it in a thermal wall prototype, a full-scale prototype again, and we have demonstrated with the monitoring campaign that the thermochromic behavior in the base wall, instead of this black wall you said, which is the conventional way, this adaptive behavior helps improving the energy efficiency. Now we are working in enhancing the durability of these materials, which is not so good. I have to say, we always have some things good and some things we have to improve. In parallel with these research lines in which we develop and characterize the materials, the innovative materials, we also work in the application of these advanced optical properties of construction materials to improve the well-being of inhabitants of different locations worldwide. And here I bring our collaboration with the Cool White project, which is a project led by the German cooperation agency, which proposes that painting roofs with cool white paints, coatings, is an affordable strategy to prevent overheating in African buildings. Of course, avoiding the use of energy, of air conditioning, and so on, taking into account the economic situation of these countries. And our contribution was to give scientific support to convince the stakeholders, the company owners, and the municipalities that this is a good strategy. And in fact, we did in-field measurements and energy modeling in buildings in Rwanda, and we confirmed the decrease the significant decrease of mean indoor air temperature in the building when the roof changed from this dark red color. It's not this building, it's this building. All the roof was painted white, like this one. But this one was used to do the monitoring because this one is too tall to measure. Okay, and it's true. Just painting white reduces the temperature inside. And another case I wanted to share with you today is our collaboration, the analysis we made of urban materials in the Chuayuma neighborhood. You see here is in the city of La Paz, the capital of Bolivia. And there we have a very cold climate because it's very high, it's a high altitude. But we also have a lot of high intensity of solar radiation. So we can use this radiation to heat the buildings, the houses. And the interesting thing of this neighborhood is that it was retrofitted before we went there. You can see using the colors of the traditional culture of Bolivia. This was a large retrofit in which the neighborhoods wanted to use these colors. This is part of a social movement that is bringing traditional colors to cultural movements, and they used this neighborhood use this movement in their own neighborhood. And then what we did, our contribution was to make a catalog of these coatings, just to give the information to the people designing selecting the coatings, to select the best one in each location, each orientation, and so on, the best one to get advantage of the solar heating to enhance the comfort indoor, and also in the out part. Well, this is just what I wanted to share. I want to go back to the initial idea that the development of sustainable materials with improved performance is necessary if we want to move towards more sustainable and habitable buildings and urban areas. But it is essential that these innovative proposals go hand in hand with the knowledge of local tradition and climate conditions of each location. And in this way, we will improve the performance of materials, but without losing sight of respect for the environment and the cultural identity of citizens. I think it's more or less the same, but from a different point of view.
And last but not least, Ricky Burdett, Director of the LSE Cities.
I don't have slides, so just maybe comment also on some of the things that have been said. I mean, in many ways, what the three presentations already are picking up on is how do buildings, how does human kind be more gentle to the environment, but also to people? I mean, that's the challenge. And the brutal reality is that we've got it really wrong. I mean, if you think of most of the images we have of Mexico City, we think of the images of many Latin American, but also many Asian cities. The statistics you used before that by 2050, 75% of the world will be urban, most of it in Africa and Asia. Just think of the images we have of what's happening on the fringes of Lagos, for example. They're all terrible. So the challenge here, and it's very interesting to hear an architect, engineers, and scientists in a way talk about the potential of doing things well, is I think something that needs to be understood. And it's good, Andres, that it's here in a school of economics and social science we're talking about this, because I think at the end, it's also the politics of this, which is just as important as the science, because I think you also mentioned that. But also, it's a good day to, in a way, reflect on these things. We have a new president of the London School of Economics as of a year called Larry Kramer, very distinguished American lawyer. Now, lawyers don't normally talk about space, but 2 days ago, he made a statement to the whole school, and it says, I'm quoting him, "Space matters, emotionally and psychologically. Good space creates a sense of optimism and pride. Bad space can have the opposite effect. Space matters socially. Now, you might say, duh, don't you? I mean, it's obvious, isn't it? But again, this is a provocation for us trained as architects, and some of you are in the room. It's actually not an easy thing to do, is to create successful human spaces. And again, I go back to the fact that probably much of the housing, much of the infrastructure of late 20th century society has actually been dishuman. And great architect Richard Rogers, who's also, of course, built in Mexico City, used to refer to it, the fact that cities can either humanize or brutalize. And perhaps that's something, but it's also humanize and brutalize at the environmental point of view. I mean, and I think it may be just worth reflecting on that, because if we take the work you've done, and not just you personally in this presentation, but your practice, it's extraordinary to take it and sort of place it in different parts of, say, Mexico City, 22 million people, so that's 3 times London. Just imagine that there are parts of that city which really do epitomize the brutalizing side and the humanizing side, not necessarily your practice, of course, but the same happens in London, the same happens in Paris. I mean, there are parts of cities which are really no-go areas, and some of them are instead exactly the opposite. And now, what are the qualities that I think we're looking at? And you talked about that in your presentation of the 3 projects. What is the thing that cuts through them all? It's public space. Now, I think what has been happening in cities over the last 40, 50, 60 years is that actually the public space has become less able to be used, less accessible to different groups of societies. The worst things happening in cities that we've studied in the last 20 years here is that actually they've become more segregated, more literally fragmented, and less able to sort of get from one place to another. You could call this gated communities, which are actually designed to keep people out. And in some cases, they're ghettos of extremely rich people, often, and often, unfortunately, exactly the opposite, ghettos of very poor people. Now, there are people here, an architect in particular, who's probably designed more public housing in London last 20 years than anyone else. And the challenges of actually not making them feel part of the integrated city is exactly what I think needs to be addressed. So I've talked about, I think, the importance, the potential of design to create spaces of integration, spaces of inclusivity. But I think another point which comes up from all the talks, actually, in a way, unexpectedly, what does sustainability actually mean? It means let's keep something for as long as possible and be as kind as possible to the environment. But the notion of longevity of time is very, very significant. And I think you mentioned the notion of adaptability, that often when you build something for whatever period, whether it's a hospital or university or housing, that they can often go out of sync with what actually happens to society. That people live in slightly different ways, new technologies come in and buildings become redundant and no longer fit for purpose, which is one of the terms that is used. Therefore, thinking about buildings in such a way that they can adapt and change over time is just as important. And I would say that's another major defect, perhaps, of the way that clients, public agencies, private and public, think of their buildings. Here it is. Here's my perfect master plan. Here's the wonderful sort of image of the computer has generated, as if sort of frozen in one period. Well, in fact, buildings like this one, Andres, need to adapt. You made a very interesting point about how buildings are used from the beginning of the day to the end of the day, how they're used at different times of the year, when it's dark and cold, when it's sunny or not. But I think more importantly, there's the issue of literally over time, as in a sequence of time, because the most unsustainable thing to do today is to demolish buildings. It's not just a question of what materials might you use, as you showed in these lovely and intelligent examples, but to demolish buildings which are there rather than retrofit them, rethink of them in such a way that they can be reused for any use is a good thing. And I think that relates to housing just as much to anything else. So I think this notion, as colleague Richard Sennett here, also who was at the LSE, that buildings, architecture should be incremental, should be a process of accretion rather than a process of fragmentation, is very important to this potential of any new building actually feeling integrated with its environment. That's a great social challenge, it's a design challenge, but it's also a governance challenge. I want to end on that point and just reflect together on the cities that we all know and inhabit. I think you both showed some images which showed either heat islands where they're concentrated. I think also some images of where there's greater deprivation, say in Mexico City or in London. I mean, each city is completely different. So how you work with that DNA, I think, is really one of the really important challenges we need to get right in the 21st century. So imagine a brain scan of London, a brain scan of Paris, a brain scan of Mexico City. And in one color, say red, you show those who are most deprived. And another color, green, you show those who are most affluent, most educated, better jobs. Each of those cities has a completely different MRI scan. Paris, as you all know, has the green, the affluent, the better quality, all in the central area, in the Haussmann Paris. The opposite is the case of the areas around the edges of the city, where people from different generations, different parts of the world have concentrated in different typologies. London is not so easy to define, and that's a good thing. It's a bit more sort of polka dotted. Obviously, in fact, the edges of London are much wealthier than some of those sort of central areas. But it's the fact that it's sort of more broken up, which is, I think, the challenge. And, you know, Mexico City, I'm not going to have to tell you that there are areas like Roma and Condesa, which are very green, but maybe once weren't, but also poorer areas, very dense areas like Neza, for example, are incredibly successful sort of in terms of community and density and all that. Therefore, I would conclude that I think the challenge you face as an architect, engineers, anyone looking at the sort of environmental effects of the built environment, need to think of built form in this wider context, which I think was the whole point and the title of this conversation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much for very, very interesting presentations, raising a lot of important issues and a lot of examples of how lives can change and communities can change and can be shaped, whether you're building a school in a remote area of Ladakh in India, or you are rebuilding a cathedral, or you're reforming the center of Mexico City, or trying to actually build a community center or a club in other parts of Mexico. So I think that represents a lot of challenges. I told you at the beginning to sharpen your knives in a figurative way. And I'm waiting for questions from the audience on any of the panelists, and maybe the panelists also can respond to any questions. Who wants to start? If not, I'll break the ice. Yes, overhead. Can you please tell me your name and where you're from, and then ask your question.
I'm Joshua McManus. I'm an architect and design manager working at NBS Schumann. Thank you all for your presentations. I have a question for Fernando. Fernando, you mentioned that you were able to convince the bank to design and build a horizontal building rather than skyscraper, which of course goes completely against the grain. It's a radical thing. I'd like to hear more about how you managed to convince the bank to do something like that.
Well, actually, the current situation of the bank is that it's in their offices are in the outskirts of Mexico City. So it's a place called Santa Fe. So it's the American model of a city. It is designed for the car, and they actually have different buildings. They're not all in one building. So actually, on 2013, there was a project, there was a competition. And all of the proposals were done in the first part of the plot, and it was this really, tall tower. But really talking with the client and the bank specifically about just, the things that would get into the advantage of creating open public spaces, green gardens, that, all of these things that would help the quality, of the office space. And the other thing was that, talking with Ana Botín, she was thinking about legacy in many ways. And when we started to talk, about the problems of doing a super high rise tower there, because it's actually sitting in water. So there's, in terms of the technicality as well, it was one of the points of advantage. And then the problem was that in Mexico, you almost have, for every 30 square meters of office, you need a parking space. So this is 70,000 square meters of office. So imagine the demand that produced. And the only alternative was to build the plots on the back and create just a parking structure. But really, that would be something negative, because all of the probably all the public space would be concentrated in the primary avenue, and then all the services would be to the back. But actually, because we're in the downtown of Mexico City, it didn't make sense. They are super interesting cafes, and if you go sometime to Mexico, I would encourage you to go to Juarez, because this colonia was actually one of the most affluent, interesting boroughs in Mexico, but it started definitely a decline when the people start moving away from it. But there's cafes, libraries, restaurants, and it was such a shame to have a piece of infrastructure like a parking space there. So the whole point of acquiring all of those plots and creating a much more horizontal instead of a vertical building made a lot of sense in the legacy. And I think that's a good thing about, corporations these days, because they are thinking about that legacy that I believe, if you come up with a sound plan that makes sense, and it's actually a cheaper solution to their projects, I mean, that's a no-brainer. So that was a little bit of the experience that we had on that specific project.
Now, that's from the panel wants to add something.
Well, I mean, you said it's inevitable that you have to go tall. It isn't. I mean, there are other ways of doing it, and then, that's why governments comes in. In Paris, you can't build over a certain height. I found out that in Rome yesterday.
Yeah.
The tallest building today is St. Peter's Dome. That's 500 years old. Right? I mean, so there is also an attitude toward what you think of your city and what,
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not just, I mean, you had a fantastic client though.
Yeah, no, definitely. But it's a matter of just working with the city as well, because all of the plots that are sitting on that main avenue used to be private houses, like really grand houses. So the plots of lands are really small, but if you actually start to create a plan that goes beyond that site, then everything starts to make sense. And actually, all of the different plots of land that are around it, now they become more successful in terms of their restaurants or liquor stores or libraries or all of these things that are happening within that part of Mexico City.
More questions? Yes, please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Akshaya. So I'm a graduate architect from Bartlett. And I have a question to Fernando, it's like an extension to the question that he asked. So you mentioned that big corporates are looking for the legacy brand that they are they're more sustainable and they're incorporating public spaces. I just wanted to ask about the school project that you mentioned, and considering that it's a smaller scale and in a smaller town. And was the client more concerned about the extra cost that involved, when you're bridging the gap between the public and the private? based on the design that you showed, like I can see that it has like a step contour. And did it go along with the site, or did you have to like excavate and build? Was there extra cost involved?
Yes, I think when you arrive to a specific site of context, there are certain hints on the things that you might be able to do. And there are magnificent schools in Mexico, you know, that and these really beautiful buildings that you come across, and colonial, all of these different buildings. But the client at first wanted to create, you know, like this really shiny building. You know, that was like the first approach. Like, I want you to create the nicest of schools. And, you know, first of all, what is the nicest school? No, that was the first question. The other question was, where do we sit in the context? Because we tend to, as architects, we tend to see a plot of land and a program, instead of just understanding all of the things that are happening around. And in that certain moment that we saw the plot of land as a void, really in the middle of all these gated communities that were housing, and that entire part of the city was built, you know, for the cars and for housing, but there wasn't a plan put in place. We started to talk about the engagement of the community and how that would bring benefits, you know, because the parents would like to enlist their kids actually in that building, because it would provide a certain flexibility in their own activities. So you would enroll your kid on the school, but you can use those facilities by the afternoon when so you could go to the gym, you can go to the courts, you can go to the green spaces that actually there was none. So that becomes almost a community center and a school, and that creates a sense of belonging, you know, to that entire area. So now it has been quite successful in how they haven't been attracting, you know, all the kids and families to join that school. But always, you know, because also the architects, and we have, you know, like we have these that the clients, you know, sometimes think of us as these architects that we just want monuments for ourselves. And I think that's definitely a movement that happened before, like 50 years ago, maybe in the modernist movement, that it was all about the architect. But I think it's all about the community and the people that use those. And the clients are becoming more sensitive. And in this case, we have a lot of luck, you know, with these two clients. And probably I have other cases that we haven't been so successful as well. But yeah.
Okay, next question, not going to Fernando. Sorry.
Because then, and I can extend for quite some time.
Yes, over there.
So you said a lot about how different spaces.
Your name and where you're from.
I'm Connor. I'm not an architect.
Okay.
But
what are you? So you're not defined in a negative way. You have to be defined in a positive way.
Very true. I work in design, but more graphics. Okay. So here, just out of personal interest. This is kind of for anyone who has anything to say on it. A good space, you were saying, should encourage interaction by anyone or anything that is around it. I wonder if you ever consider how you might encourage interaction from non-human life, the local plants or animals that will inevitably come into contact with the spaces you create.
Who wants to take on that question?
I can do. So, for instance, in Sagrada Familia, there is a hawk's nest actually in the towers, and this is not here. Okay. So in Sagrada Familia, we've got the hawk's nests, and there is a couple of other birds also coming to the site. On the school project as well, we've got the garden of Tibetan Buddhists, which is basically full of bees, full of the flowers, and sort of where the valleys are filled with the water, that is, you know, when basically a snow melt is going down from the mountain all the way to the banks of River Indus. That is sort of where the valley really comes to life. And that's where all the beautiful population of birds, of bees, of everything comes, and the whole area sort of starts to vibrate and bloom. So I think that is my reply to your question.
Okay, Helena, please, your question.
Hi, I'm Helen. I have an engineering background, and I had a question about the stone. Like you said, it was an overlooked material, but when I'm thinking about the stone, like I'm thinking about something that was used by people for centuries, but now in Europe you can see that a lot of careers are closing. So I was wondering, is it overlooked because we're losing this knowledge about the properties? I was surprised you were not mentioning the properties of the stones because they can be very different depending on the stone you're using. So are we losing this knowledge of the stone, or is it because it's becoming more difficult to build with the stone because we have other alternatives? So what is?
I would say, if anything, it's actually becoming easier and easier to build with the stone. Now the price is really rooted into the context. So if you look at the Gaudi Sagrada Familia, for instance, Gaudi had a mission of reclaiming the stone from the context nearby, and he actually wanted to get the stone from the Montjuic quarry, which was just nearby. Nevertheless, what happened with the next phases after his death, which is actually doing now, is that they had to reclaim the stone from different quarries. So something that had to be reclaimed from Galicia, from Asturias, from France, which are all the places nearby. Okay, some of that had to be reclaimed beyond this point because the amount of rock we needed. So we had over 50 different types of stone and over 200,000 tons of stone used so far on Sagrada Familia. Stone has beautiful properties, and some of them, is durability. It also is thermal resistance. There is also, it's a material that is low on carbon. Okay, and if you can transport it from the site that are nearby, I think you're getting yourself a really, really good deal. And the reason why we are not using it as often because it's expensive, and also because in the 2000s we had a material revolution, so plastics, concrete, all of that. But that's not as sustainable. And we've got the materials that have been going on for such a long time, something that I think we should come back to. And when I was a student, and I think being a student is always a very good thing. And we are students all our lives. And when I was that student, I remember being at UCL Institute of Making and exploring with different materials. And I remember my teacher, she would always bring me back to earth, saying, why are you looking for something really out of this world if you've got something right on the side? So I think rooted back into the context, that's the answer.
Okay,
Can I?
I'm conscious, yeah, go ahead, please.
Can I add something? Well, I think that the stone is everything you've said, but and plastics have, polymers and so on, a lot of environmental issues and so on. But the stone is very heavy, so it's not useful for all the applications. The plastics or polymeric materials have these other issues, environmental issues, and the wood has other advantages and disadvantages. We have to deepen, to go deeper in the knowledge of each material, to use the adequate one for each application, but thinking very well about the application, about where will we put this material. I mean, it's quite complex. It's not good to not to consider stone, of course, because it's a very, very interesting material, but there are many options, and the main thing is to think it about and to.
I think Gloria has it spot on because stone really has to be from the local context. So if you are looking at the projects that we looked at, which was Sagrada Familia or in Himalayan, where we couldn't really bring any of the material from outside because there was no infrastructure, it will be very, very expensive. It will be difficult to bring it to the site, especially that we had snow for 6 months. And out of the other 6 months, we had 3 to 4 months where you could actually establish some construction in place. So the natural choice of material there in very remote region was stone. Again, for Gaudi, it was because it was continuation of the work. And the reason why we are not constructing anymore that much with stone, because people consider it more expensive. Which really depends. It's not always true.
Okay, I'm very conscious of time. We started late, so I'm going to allow 2 more questions. So First one over here.
My name is Luz. I'm from Mexico. Thank you for the lecture. My question is for Gloria. I was wondering, what do you think that are the challenges for sustainable materials to make it more commercial? Let's say, as an architect, like when we're designing something, the options for sustainable materials seem limited. So I was wondering, like, how to work that gap.
Well, the thing is that now we have a lot of information about materials. We are working on life cycle analysis. We have a lot of tools and a lot of information, but it's the same I said before. We have to be careful and use this information to advance and not to imitate, to do the same things everywhere. The sustainability in materials we can be improved, as I said, for cement-based materials. Reusing. You said that the main strategy should be to retrofit buildings and also to reuse the construction and demolition waste from these buildings we cannot retrofit and so on. So these ways, the circular economy is a basic thing for sustainability in construction. And also the use of technology in the proper level. We have to be developing more materials, innovative materials with advanced properties, but not like Portland cement for anything. We have to use concrete everywhere. No, concrete is one material that should improve some things, but have unique properties in other aspects. So is this thing is the same that happens in many other things now. We have a lot of information. We just have to think it over and to use this information in the best way. And sustainability in materials is, I think this is the way. Mm-hmm.
Last question from the audience. Yes, over there.
Hi, I'm Carl. I have an architecture background, but I won't come to marketing now. My question is different. I mean, my question, I guess, is kind of just summarizing as well, like, because we've touched on a lot of really interesting things today. You've touched on the sustainability of materials, you've touched on the cost of it, you've touched on challenging the client brief. But what about, about the sustainability, the human sustainability of the space, of the place, in terms of like, actually loving the place and keeping it around for a very long time? I mean, there's a lot of things that we can engineer to be quite, sustainable in a material sense, in a cost sense. But then I guess my question to all three of you is, how do you make people love it? Because surely that must be the most sustainable thing if you keep it going for a long time.
Yeah, and I think probably what I would say and what we try in our projects is, in a sense, is appropriation of the building from the community, and you can achieve that in many ways. In one way is the use of local materials, as you said, and bringing and getting involved the community in the construction of that building per se, and in the process of that building. And then really understanding the necessities of the place that you're acting upon, because I think the research, really understanding the place, the context, and just the overall needs of that place. So if there's needs for something and the people use it, they're probably, and it works for that use, they're gonna embrace it. That's been our experience. So, for example, in the project of Reforma, instead of thinking, okay, this is a shopping center with that as the only purpose, shopping center of this mixed-use space, let's create one safe public place for the entire borough of Juarez, and that gets a sense of belonging. It becomes a public space. And that in Mexico, it's obviously, it's quite needed. So that's how you create that engagement.
Okay, so we are going to wrap things up and let me just sit down for a moment, but I'm going to take my privilege to ask a question or two questions, but you don't have to answer. I'm going to give you then 30 seconds each to just give your famous last words. But the first one is regarding something that didn't come very much in your presentations, but came later, the cost of it and what Ricky said about how can we generalize this. Paint is cheap, stone is expensive. How can you reconcile the sort of things that you're doing with expanding it to large populations across what are now large cities in the world, but not just large cities, also medium-sized and smaller-sized cities? And then the final thing is, after all, we're at the LSE, the London School of Economics, and economics hasn't appeared, and most of my colleagues in economics, especially the urban economists, maybe economists made by bad architects, but architects might make bad economists. They are saying cities are places of opportunity. You have to improve and you have to make them bigger, and you have to increase the density. So there would be much bigger flow of knowledge in both directions, and that would create prosperity, not just for the people of the cities, but for our countries and for the whole of humanity. But that's very difficult to reconcile when, for example, you're using the centro colon just to build low, you're using space very close to Puebla to build a school that is beautiful and blends, but disappears and uses the space that, well, most of my colleagues would build massive skyscrapers. So how do you juggle everything? And I'm going to give you 30 seconds to answer these questions or to answer whatever you want to say, starting with Ricky and then ending with Gloria.
No, sir. As you know, I'm a faculty member of this institution. I greatly respect economists, but they've got it wrong. Because actually, first of all, density, which is the answer to everything you've said, I think we would in one way or another agree, does not mean tall buildings. The densest three cities in Europe are Athens, Barcelona, and Paris. So if you actually put everything together in well-designed buildings with all the infrastructure, schools, hospitals, everything close to them, and reduce the need for the car. I mean, you said that crazy statistic of how many car parking spaces are required in Mexico. I mean, that's the craziest thing of all I've heard tonight. I think that's where I would go. So I think let's work with the economists on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think you put it perfectly there in that question, and I would then answer probably the first question. And I think it's not, the question is, it's not about stone or materials in that sense. I think it's about place, you know, because if you really understand the place and the natural resources of that place, and there is, you know, availability, I think the most sustainable material is the one that you can find close to the site where you're building. And I think in that sense, and answering your question, is that we shouldn't talk about materials before we talk about the project, you know, and that is going to give you the clue to what material you need to use. And yeah, I don't know.
Absolutely. I think Fernando has done a great job answering that question. I'll just add a little bit to it. So stone is considered expensive. Nevertheless, in some circumstances, it might be actually cheaper than steel or concrete, like the project we were seeing tonight, and rooting it into the context and really reflecting it back to what people are needing. So for instance, the climatic condition of Himalayan mountain, or, you know, when you've got extensive sun in Sagrada Familia on the top of those towers, that actually gives you quite a bit of a briefer in the very, very humid time, because that will provide the shade, that will provide the ventilation, that will provide daylight. So it's just a great material to work with. And in order to make people to love it, well, I think they need to grow up to it, and they need to find it in the context, and they need to see that actually that makes them feel better.
Well, my answer is different. It's just to let you know that this catalog of construction materials I talked about before with thermo-optical properties, this was our our focus, but now we are constructing a wider catalog in which we are including the thermoptical properties and also the LCA analysis and the LCC, the life cycle analysis data, the global warming potential and all these things for the environmental impact, and also the cost, the LCC, because all the information has to be taken into account. This is what I meant with my, and we have to have all the properties and also permeability of pavements and many other things. We have all this information. We are just trying to collect it to see to make the choice, to make an intelligent and a well-based choice of the material for each place, of course. Yeah. In each context and each climate and each we cannot generalize. I think it's not good to you said how can we generalize? I think it is not the economics. Yeah. I agree that this is not thank you.
Okay. So well, thank you very much. I would like you to everyone to show your appreciation for what has been a fantastic session. I'd like to start thanking all of you for the fantastic presentations. Thanking all of you for coming and being here. All of you that are watching us online, please keep on coming. In 2 weeks' time, the Kenyana Land Center here at the LSE would have another session, so that would be on the 27th of March at this very time, 6 o'clock, and we'll have, on a very related topic, the director of the Amsterdam Institute for Sustainable Development, Sustainable Cities, Evelyn van Leuven. This institute is a mixture of Harvard, University of Amsterdam, and Wageningen, and she's going to be talking about sustainable cities. To get the information, follow us online, on LinkedIn and Twitter, and I hope to see you coming in all new events that we organize together with the Cervantes Institute and all the other sponsors that have been here. So many thanks for coming. Antes me perdían cada vez.
Yeah, I really like to you. Yes,